invitation today for Power Hour. You are a two-time Emmy Award winner producer and the founder and CEO of Archangel, a community of superhero entrepreneurs, leaders, and game changers that are making the world a better place through mission-driven entrepreneurship and philanthropy. You host a large-scale fundraiser in Toronto every September for thousands of entrepreneurs called Archangel Summit, and I'm super excited as I'll be attending this September, where all the proceeds are used to support various charities and offer microloans, investments, and grants to entrepreneurs creating positive impact. Over 250,000 people have attended your events. You also run an invitation-only private community called Archangel Masters for highly successful entrepreneurs, impacting the lives of millions of people. And again, I'm very happy to be part of that community. And I can't wait to have access, and I'm actually grateful to have access to you and your knowledge.
Thank you.
Many people don't actually know that you are Canadian, right?
I am Canadian.
Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that you are Canadian. And probably I mentioned to everyone, and I sent an email out, and I said, this is a Canadian that it's worth looking into it, and he's changing lives, and it could be very well changing yours.
Canadian, born and raised, and still live in Toronto. Formerly a realtor too. So there's all that.
Give us a little bit of background for some people that have the excitement of discovering you for the first time.
I started producing events when I was 17 at the time, and this is in the year 1994. So I was hosting dance parties for teenagers. And our first event had 1,000 people. It was a lot of fun. I have the benefit and gratitude of realizing what my superpowers are at a very young age. Although back then I didn't realize that that's what it was, but I just felt in love with producing events and bringing people together and building community. So I've been doing that my whole life. It's led me into a bunch of different directions. I'm also skilled at marketing and strategy and all the business growth type of good stuff. And I was marketing coaching for a while. That led me into the real estate space in Toronto, specifically selling pre-construction condos to investors. And from 2010 to 2016, I was responsible for 200 million in pre-construction sales. So I was winning all these awards and doing really well. However, I never felt like the industry was aligned with me. But the success from doing that work allowed me to invest in myself, allowed me to figure out who I am, what my big dreams are. I started going to a lot of conferences and mastermind groups and doing personal development. And in all the things I was attending, realizing there was something missing. So I essentially created this company, Archangel, to build the community of people that I want to be around, because I couldn't find it myself. So I figured, let me just start it myself. And it was almost a side project in 2014 during my real estate days. I was doing these smaller events in Toronto for 150 people. And then the word spread and it started getting bigger. I started doing events in the US too, in Los Angeles and San Diego. And by 2016, the Archangel momentum was so big, I actually quit real estate and I went all in. And we did our first big Archangel Summit in 2016. We had 1,500 people, and we've been doing one a year ever since. And now this is actually our 10-year anniversary of the business. And we've just set some major big dreams for the next 10 years, including an arena tour. So by 2030, we'll be in 12 cities doing arenas. Like I want to do Scotiabank Arena in Toronto for our big event in a couple of years. And the whole intention of what I'm doing is to help anyone who cares about other people to realize what their dreams are and to live their dream, especially if you're self-employed. So I believe that entrepreneurs and anyone who's self-employed has the freedom and responsibility to change the world in some way and to impact the lives of other people. If you're a business coach, you're helping other businesses. If you're a real estate or agent, you're helping people find the houses of their dreams, right? That we all help other people. And I want to help the helpers. And I want to create a community of people like us and give you every resource you need to succeed on your path so that you can impact a lot more people. And that's who I am and what we do. We also produce films, right? So you mentioned my first film, which is called Dreamer. It's a documentary. The film won 3 Emmy Awards. And now we're starting to do like science fiction, some really cool stuff. Like at our event in September that you're coming to, without revealing too much, the event will feel like you're in a movie. Like we're actually shooting a film that's a time travel kind of thing where the movie plays throughout the event and comes to life on stage. And by the end of the event, the audience is part of the story and you will feel transformed. You will leave this event feeling like I can conquer the world. I could dream bigger. I can hit all my goals. I could be the person that makes my dreams a reality. And that's what we're doing this year.
I can tell you how excited I am and how grateful I actually am to kind of discover you. You know, it's funny because there's some joy in discovering something that really changes your life. And I'm super, super excited, not only for September, but for all of the events. I'm a huge believer in what you're doing.
Thank you.
I share the vision with you, and I'm grateful to participate. And I'm here to support and to actually make others aware of this movement. I would call it a movement, and bring them into this ecosystem for their lives to change. So we're very grateful for you to put this type of work and this vision to life. I wanted to ask you from a perspective of someone, and I know that a lot of my audience find themselves in this position as leaders, specifically in organizing events, because I think you're the master of events planning and events happening with success. What's the magic recipe when you actually start? Once you have the momentum, once you have the credibility of the industry or other industries, you have people reaching out to you. But when you don't have any of that, what's the secret?
Well, I'll share what I focus on because I think it's different than almost everyone who does events. I personally, I find a lot of events boring. And I think for anyone that has attended, let's say any kind of business event, it's often you feel like people are trying to sell you something, or they're not sharing their best stuff, or it's literally boring. And I've solved all of that. Like at our event, we treat it like a show. So the best analogy is if you've ever been to a Cirque du Soleil performance, what they've done to the circus industry, they've just raised the bar, and it's not just a circus, it's a show. It's almost like a Broadway show with circus performers. So we have a business experience for entrepreneurs and anyone who's self-employed, that is entertaining, and it's no one's selling you anything. You other than how to be the best version of yourself and how to succeed on your path. And I design my shows so that people want to come back the next year. And that's so anyone even starting an event, because people say, well, you're so good at this event thing. What advice do you have for me? I want to do my first event. And I always say, plan your second event. And they look at me all weird. Like, I know, but I haven't done my first one. And my thing is design the first one that's so good, people want to come back to the second one and have the second one already lined up. Instead of thinking, how do I have a specific outcome for this event only? And to me, it's like films. Like make a movie so good that if you made a sequel, people would want to watch that too. That kind of feeling where it's episodic. And I design my events as if you're in a movie. So there's a story. I actually hired an Emmy-nominated screenwriter to write the script for the film. Like we go crazy with experience design.
Amazing. I was part of one of your webinars where I knew about you, but with that webinar, you really made me fall in love with the concepts, with your concepts. And that's where I actually dig deeper into what you're doing and how you're doing. So I highly recommend everyone to watch that webinar. I don't know if you have it recorded. It was live when I attended,
Yep.
but if you have it, just let me know, give me the link, and I highly recommend people to do that. For the ones that they won't go that step to watch that webinar, although I highly recommend it. You mentioned something in your webinar that really stayed with me. And that was the fact that when you organize events based on the experience of the event versus who's speaking, because that's one of the things that we see over and over again, and myself included until I came across you and this thought. Who am I going to have as speaker that will draw more people in? And if you can touch more on that subject, because I think it's so crucial.
Yeah, I think, okay, so when someone's deciding if to go to an event, right? How do they actually think about it? And having a speaker they recognize or someone they want to learn from is often important. But what they really want is their own transformation. They want a result. And I think what they don't realize they want is to be around other people like them. In the past 5 to 10 years, the world has shifted so much with respect to even making friends and building relationships. Not like I'm secretly a matchmaker for people to meet and connect with and build relationships with other awesome people like them. And that's what I do. So the who's on stage is almost an excuse to get people to get off their couch and actually come to an event, but really they're there to transform, to learn, and most importantly, to connect. And it's that connection that's missing. And then, COVID and all that made it even worse. So I think, and all growth happens faster in community. I'm where I'm at because of the people I've surrounded myself with. I've surrounded myself with people who are further down the path than I am, so I can learn from them faster. And the who matters way more than the how. So my job is to bring all the best people together in the room at the same time, and then watch the magic happen. And it's like, think of any blockbuster movie. If there's if Tom Cruise, right, or some very A-list actor is in the movie, chances are more people are going to go watch it because of who's in the film, but it still has to be a good movie. If it's a terrible script, if it's a terrible film, people will complain. That's how I see it. It's like the experience has to be incredible. Who's on stage is important, but I don't see the audience as not important. To me, the audience is just as, like, who's attending is just as important as who's on stage. And if you are someone that cares about making yourself better and cares about making other people better and cares about succeeding, you are one of us. And you are as important to me as the person on the stage.
Amazing. I don't know, you are aware at this point, but there's mental shifts from what we're used to believe, that we're always kind of think, what's the outcome for me versus what's the outcome for the public, what the public actually wants to see or hear or learn. You, in the same webinar, and I keep going back to that because it was so good, I wanted more to get and to suck out of that conversation. You also mentioned how you invite people to speak at your events and how you actually started, because again, very few people will ever be at your level. Most people will be at the level where you are when you started. How you convinced people to come to speak to your events, people that at the point where you don't have yet the credibility of putting together great events.
Yeah, so our first summit, we had people like Gary Vaynerchuk and Seth Godin and Robin Sharma speak, who are all very well known, either entrepreneurs or authors, speakers. And I'll share my Seth Godin story because it's my favorite. He's my favorite author ever. He's written 20 best-selling books on marketing. If you don't know him, buy all his books. And he's spoken at a bunch of our events. And I sent him, I wanted him to speak at our first event, and I didn't know him. I wasn't connected to him. I had no way of being introduced. So I thought the only way is to send a cold email pitch, which, how do you pitch the best marketer in the world, right? And this is what I said, and this is what worked. And I'll share how to use this for anything, for anyone watching this in your own life. What I said was, Seth, my name is Giovanni. I'm your biggest fan, and I know you've heard that a million times. And I've read all your books, and I know you've heard that a million times. But here's the thing you haven't heard. I am your success story, and I'm your case study. And let me break down how I learned from every one of your specific books, how I used it, and what the result is. And I turned myself into a case study of how I've built first my real estate business and then my Archangel business. And it was all a direct result of me being a student that paid attention, that not just read his books, but actually took action, which most people don't, that's the extra step. It's like, not just what have you learned, but what have you done with it? And I said, because I am your student and because I paid attention to you and did the work, I'm now about to produce an event that only exists because of you. And it would be so amazing for you to come speak at this event and close the loop. And his response was, how do I say no to this? So, and the lesson is, the other thing that was important was, I paid him to speak, but it wasn't just about money, because he gets so many opportunities to speak that he can say no to almost everything. And he doesn't like flying, which is another friction point because he's in New York. But he was willing to say yes because of how I positioned this, because I realized every single human is on their own journey and they have a future they want to get to, and they have things that matter to them. And if you can figure out what matters to them and you help them get there faster, you become valuable to them. And for someone like him who's successful, he's done all the things. He doesn't need another speaking engagement. He doesn't need anything. What matters to him is realizing that his work matters, that all of the blood, sweat, and tears and all of the failures and successes meant something. And I showed him that I am the thing that matters, right? And I think for all of us, if we're trying to get something accomplished, if we need help from other people, even if you want to sell something, if you're an entrepreneur or a salesperson, what is the other person's path? Where do they want to get to? What's in their way? How can you help them create value for them and be useful? And it works. And that's how we started our big events. And I still do that right now.
Yeah. I want to share something with you. I listened to your webinar, and before listening to your webinar, I actually created some very small events, like 50 people or 25 people, where somehow I always thought that it has to, I didn't have, I guess, the courage to reach out to speakers that I would have loved to have them speak for the knowledge that they have to my audience. And after listening to your webinar, I actually organized a team leaders events where some of the biggest team leaders in Canada were absolutely open to come and speak, and they did. And everybody actually thought that somehow I paid them to come to the event. And I said, I don't have the capacity to pay them. And I just used Giovanni's, a formula, which I think is absolutely brilliant, but it also adds a certain element of honesty to the collaboration that I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that position of where it was transactional before, it was this time a different type of exchange rather than what it could have been if I would have not have that mental switch. The event was incredibly successful. We stayed significantly longer. It's supposed to be 3 hours. We stayed almost 5 hours. The speakers were continuing speaking. The engagement of the public was amazing. But what's most important is the feedback that I got after and the relationships that I created with these speakers that came, and they really give it all without actually retaining information or without being there for a certain purpose rather than the contribution. And I end up actually with multiple collaborations after. And the reason I mentioned that is not to you know, I want people to understand that this formula actually works. It's something that really changed my perspective. And now in October, I'll be organizing my first 150 people event that I'm hoping to host. And again, speaking with you, I started to organize it, and now you changed my mind as I'm speaking with you. And you just said some really amazing words, which is people want to be transformed. Information is not everything. How they leave that to be transformed. So my goal is no longer who's going to come and give the most amount of information to people, knowledge, because people don't need knowledge. With the technology we have right now, they can get that in a click of a button, but they need something that impacts them. So thank you so much for sharing that with me, because this is going to be an amazing event. And yeah, and I derailed from that, but I wanted to say thank you and for aligning me right now, right on the spot for my future event. One other thing that I want to mention, because you did give me that confidence, just ask. And I want you to talk about it, because I just reached out to you and I asked you, like, look at you, you're putting these amazing events, the speakers you have, and yet you gave me your 45 minutes out of your time. And I just asked, and I started asking people at the level that I thought they will never even open an email from me. Tell me about that mentality that's really changing lives by having the courage and to do things that normally you think that you cannot reach.
Well, it never hurts to ask. I think people are, they have a fear of rejection, and they think it has something to do with them. But rejection is more, or when someone says no to a request, it's often because they don't understand the value exchange or the win-win scenario, or the benefit to getting them further down their path. So you asking even me to do this, you're already coming to my event. Us having this conversation means you're exposing me to a lot more people in your world that I could transform. And they might want to come to this event. It's a win-win. I'm very guarded with my time, and I also like you, right? And there's all of these components put together that I think holds people back from asking for things, but maybe they don't know how to ask.
Yeah.
So because I get 100 people a day asking me for things where I just say no, because I don't understand why I would say yes. Right. So it's up to the asker, the person doing the asking, to do their homework to figure out what's in it for the other person, and what is the value exchange, and how are you either saving them time or bringing them further down their path, or doing something useful that helps them. And if you understand those parts of the equation, asking for things becomes easier. But I think building an ask muscle is also an important thing. We're so scared to ask for anything. The answer is always no if you don't ask.
100%. I wanted to ask you, obviously, you've been doing this since you were a teenager. Do you think that was part of your personality, the way you were born, or you developed that mentality and that drive, that leadership? When do you think there was a pivotal moment And is that something that usually applies to people? Is a pivotal moment where they kind of fall into a leadership, or is something that is more work towards between being surrounded by certain people, mimic them, books, events? What do you think it's it's the recipe?
That is a fantastic question. I think there are certain components that we are born with, and then there's environment, um, and there's experience. Meaning, so when I was young, uh, I moved around a lot in Toronto. So I went to 5 different elementary schools, which means I was often the new kid, and there was a bunch of bullying that happened to me that was painful. And because of the pain of being bullied and being the new kid and trying to fit in, I actually developed a skill for relationship building when I was a kid, getting people to like me quick because otherwise, it would be painful. And that pain unleashed the gift of community building, the gift of bringing people together. And I think that often that's one of the patterns I've seen where someone has a painful experience and it unleashes a gift that they can use to help other people either avoid the pain or get through it quicker. So that's one component. And then I think being open to the magic of life in terms of our path and what's in our environment and choices we make. Right. So um, anyone watching this, you are invited to come to my event, September 21st in Toronto. It's not just an event, it's literally a pivotal point in your life and your journey that will change and up level things for you. That's the best way to explain it. And that's what happens to people when they come to my things because of how we design the experience and because of who they meet. And it's like Superman's phone booth. Clark Kent goes into the phone booth, comes out as Superman. It's that feeling of you come into my event as one person, you leave as a transformed person. And it's a challenge to explain without someone actually going through it. But this is not just a seminar or something. It's a show that changes your life.
Well, I'm
That's my
super excited
that's
to be there.
yeah. And you'll see. And what after you this is your first one of my events, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, you'll see. After you'll be like, what? Wow.
Well, I'm super, super excited. And obviously I would try to bring as many people as I can in my world. And I've been doing that for a while, actually, with other events like Tony Robbins and, in our world, Tom Ferry and so on. So I kind of, everywhere where I go, I kind of drag other people's in. I wanted to ask you, how do you manage it? Because I find myself, and I know that many of the team leaders that I'm in contact with, there is a mental struggle as things progress. And how do you manage that portion of the mental and emotional struggles that you have? I would direct it just on like managing emotions on a daily basis of the ups and downs of growing a business at this level and the impacts and everything that comes with it.
Yeah.
What's your recipe to deal with that?
Um, if you met me 15 years ago, I was insanely anxious and suffered from a lot of anxiety, panic attacks, maybe depression on top of all that. And today I am um, at a much better place uh, as an entrepreneur, but the problems don't get smaller, they get bigger. And uh, I've built the capacity and capability of nervous system regulation, meaning I can stay calm and peaceful with more crisis. And I've learned that from mentors and the people I've hired as coaches. I'm smiling right now because most of the people I've hired to help me are speaking at my event. Like because it's our 10-year anniversary, I thought, who's helped me on my journey? I want them all in the room at the same time to helping our community. And I think understanding how our brains work, um, like Okay, so have you ever been in a movie theater where something dramatic happens or sad and you start crying? You've had that experience, right? What, but what actually happened to you that made you cry? Not,
Obviously, I internalized something about me related to what I've been seeing. I'm a movie fanatic, just so you know. I worked in the movie industry for 7 years, and I'm fanatic about movies. So watch a lot of movies, and I know that there are scripts, and yet, and I know how they were made because I worked on sets, and yet there is an emotional trigger that they give, which I look for it. I thrive on it. I love it. And I want it all the time because it actually impacts me
right.
and it gives me so much to work with in my day-to-day life.
But nothing actually happened in your life in the moment. You're sitting in a movie theater.
Correct. Yeah.
So you have a connection to a story happening in front of you that makes you have an emotional response.
Yeah.
So if that's possible, the opposite is possible, where a thing happening to you doesn't give you an emotional response because you know you can detach from it. Like I feel like in our lives, things happen. Let's say it's a conversation, or you're even reading a post on social media, and it triggers you in some way. It's because you're giving it meaning based on your own experiences. It's like you're wearing glasses right now. It's like wearing glasses with a lens of story that you don't even realize is there, and that's causing the way you're thinking about what's happening. Life happens, and then we add meaning to it, and then we have emotion attached to the meaning, not to the thing that happened, unless it's very traumatic. Either way, right? So I think understanding how to detach the meaning from the event is part of this, and that's what been very useful for me.
Sorry?
For me, it's been very useful to understand that we're all wearing these glasses and how to have empathy, realizing everyone else is wearing the glasses too. Like, have you ever been in an argument with someone and you're like, why are we even fighting? It's because of this. And it makes life easier to understand how this works.
I always thought, and for whatever reason, it was my priority in sales because sales it's a tough industry to be in, regardless of you sell real estate or anything else. Sales is hard. That emotional regulation is the number one priority before learning your scripts, before picking up the phone. Emotional regulation. I find that as me personally, and again, the people that will see this interview, their team leaders, as you progress from being a solo agent to a team leader, that necessity it goes to the next level. And as you transition from team leader to coach, organizing events and all that, it goes to the next level and next level. The need of emotional regulation is so important, and that's something that I have as my priority number one before anything else. And one of the reasons I love going to events and I love going to seminars, and especially in person more than even online, because it allows me to regulate my emotions, and then for a period of time being able to perform and then come back to another webinar, seminar, and events, again gaining that emotional regulation. Is there a certain element of feeling guilty, or how do you deal with that, the fact that we're having these ups and downs and we can't be linear more into our emotional state? How do you deal with guilt? Is there a guilt, and how do you deal with it?
I give me an example.
For example, I know this situation, I rationalize the situation, and yet next time being in the same position, you're back into the same emotional state of discomfort, although you've dealt with that before. And is there a guilt that comes in saying, why can't you just move on much faster this time, since you rationalize already a similar situation that would allow you to also be more productive and move faster in your
Okay,
job.
so any we are harder on ourselves than we ever are on other people. And imagine you could detach from yourself for a second. Imagine you were your best friend or brother, sister type person, like a very close relationship, or even a child. If for anyone who's watching has kids, I have 3 kids. If your child came up to you or your best friend and said, you know what, I made a mistake, how would you help them? Or what would you say? Would you say you're an idiot? You're a ding dong. I can't believe how stupid you are for doing that thing. Or just, no, you would love them. That's the reframe for how to treat yourself. And when you start, and all of these things it's a practice. It's a skill. It's not a trait that you're born with. Even the shame or guilt is actually a habit too. It's a skill that we've learned. It's not a thing you're not born with these things. You're taught it by watching other people do it. And you have painful experiences, and then you literally learn how to treat yourself based on the people that you've seen around you. It's very interesting. So our responsibility is to change the practice and change the skill of how you talk to yourself. It's hard because it's just easier to have the same habits than it is to change them. And we love our comfort zones, but growth happens outside your comfort zone. And it's like learning any skill, whether it's sales, which is a skill, or confidence is a skill. Soccer, I love soccer, football. But to play, you don't start off playing and being the best in the world. You do your drills. A musical instrument. I play piano. I played piano for 10 years of lessons. So I'm a professional pianist. You don't start by playing Beethoven. You start by learning one key at a time and playing the skill. That's how it is to treat yourself. That's how it is to have confidence. That's how it is to sell. Like something interesting you said, you're like, sales is hard. Everything is hard when you start until you practice the skills. And if you're taught by someone who knows what they're doing and you have good coaching and mentorship, that becomes just like any other thing. Like, if you're an athlete and you have an Olympic coach, you're going to learn better than a high school coach. And I bring in Olympic coaches to my events for business and personal development. And actually, literally, one of our speakers is Dr. Jeff Spencer, who was an Olympian, and he was, Bono from U2's coach. He's Tiger Woods' coach, and he's speaking at my event. Like, these are the kinds of people I bring in for you and everyone else coming. But I think you have to treat personality as a skill and think of it that way, that you practice every day and actually put in a bit of effort, even in how you talk to yourself. And another important thing, I love doing this with people. I love, if I'm speaking at an event, I'll ask the audience, let me ask you, do you believe you use your imagination today as an adult more or less than when you were a child?
Oh, significantly less. And it's so funny you asked me these questions, because I have a question that I wanted to ask you. How do you balance creativity with practicality?
Well, I'm gonna pause you for a second, because I believe that's false.
That's
I
false.
believe you use your imagination just as much as when you were a child. The only difference is that you call it stress and anxiety. So when you think of anxiety, what actually is it? It's us telling ourselves a story of the future that's scary. Like, what if I fail? What if this doesn't work out? What if I get rejected? What if things don't turn out good? What if bad things happen to me? It's storytelling at the highest level about a future that has a negative outcome. When we are kids, we don't really know about negative outcomes. We're taught those things through experience and through our parents and teachers and all that stuff. So everything is a positive. So our imagination is rainbows and unicorns and fairies and invisible friends and whatever. But it's creating something that doesn't exist that has a positive outcome. And that's how we feel as a kid. And then as our lives get shaped, we experience pain. And pain is beautiful too. Like all emotions are beautiful. It has a negative reputation, but I think one of the beauties of life is the range of emotions we get to experience. But when, you know, as an adult, you're still using your imagination muscles. You're just creating a negative outcome. So if you practice creating a positive outcome again, like you did when you were a kid, you actually have more positive outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I didn't think it in this term, but I'm happy you gave it a different meaning. I wanted to ask you this question, and I'm going back to it because I think I see a lot of team leaders that I work with being so caught up on the practicality of the things that they want to implement. They do, they scale, and they lose the creativity between that anxiety that you just mentioned. They kind of forget to dream and to create visions. How do you balance that, and how do you gain that balance where you do implement, but you still create, you still have the mental and emotional capacity to dream of a vision?
Step one is to surround yourself with people who believe the new story more than the old story. I think what gets in a lot of people's way is their current environment, meaning, well, why do people even stop dreaming in the first place? Probably because someone told them it's stupid, because that person had a bad experience. And our personality and our habits get shaped by the people we're around. I um I've surrounded myself not just with big dreamers, but people who've succeeded in a big way because they've opened up the possibility of my own future in terms of uh you know, if they can do it, I can do it. And I have done it. And now I've done the same thing for everyone who comes to my events in my community. It's like you have the people in your day-to-day life that may be draining your energy and telling you why you shouldn't do things. Um, and maybe because that's from their own limited experience. But when you're around people who are up to big things, it changes everything. It changes the lens you look through, and it gives you hope, and it gives you believability in what's possible for you. And that's why I think, you know, community and environment is so important.
How do you deal with, again, the guilt of leaving some of the people of your current environment behind and embracing fully without feeling like you've done something unfair to the people that you leave behind in order to join the new communities?
Well, where does the guilt come from? Like, I think reframing the story you're telling yourself that you're going to lead by example. I'll give you an example. So let's say, and I don't think this is you, but for someone watching this, maybe everyone they're around, they think has bad health habits. I'm just making this up as an example. Like maybe they drink a lot, they smoke a lot, they eat terrible foods. And when the people around you have health habits that you think aren't serving them, it actually makes it easier for you to have negative health habits. And that's just one example of how this all works. So what if you lead by example and you shift your own health? Maybe it has a positive impact. It's not guilt that you're not eating the McDonald's every day. It's leading by example that maybe you're going to help the people around you to change, but it's up to them to change. It's not up to you. So you don't necessarily even have to drop all your friends or whoever they are. It's changing you for your betterment for the people around you. It's up to them to join you. You can't have a guilt attached to if they don't want to change. And if they see you changing and they don't like it, because now they feel guilty about themselves. They may even say negative things to you. Like, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe, why do you want to build a business? Why do you want to be healthier? Why do you go to the gym all the time? Why? But that's their own story. And you're not responsible for them. You're responsible for you.
One of the things that I talk with a lot of team leaders, either the ones that I personally coach or the ones that we mastermind together and we go to event, and it comes over and over again, almost like, and it seems to be the one that affects the most, is their relationship with their own family. And I'm not talking about husband or spouse or significant other. I'm talking about most of the time, the relatives around that you grew up with.
Right.
I find it that comes the most predominant in the conversations of them dealing with their family in regards to their new habits, their new goals, their new lives, and this position of constantly managing these relationships, which you can get away from because they're family, they're relatives, but in the same time, they require a large amount of brain space to not only just, when you see them or when you talk to them, but they take a lot of brain space. And it just happened that I was in positions like that. And I kind of talk from my experience, but I'm curious if that's something that the people that you surround yourself, they come across, and how they deal with, and how do you help someone in a situation like that?
Okay, so empathy is very important. If you're in that situation and you have family members who are telling you not to do something, or telling you why you're wrong, or arguing with you, there's a reason that's happening for them, and it's not about you. It's about them. We don't understand how this works, but I think, staying in your own power of your own transformation and your own evolution, and loving them, even me. And what I mean by this is, like, being grateful that they care enough to give you advice, even if you feel like it's the wrong advice. And to be like, I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. It's very important to me that you care about me in this way. Uh, I'm doing this for me, and this is important for me. And we may not agree, but and maybe I'm wrong too. But let me be wrong for myself, and let me figure out my own journey. Like, it's people get angry when they don't feel understood. So when fights happen, or arguments, or all this stuff, the draining energy is because someone has their own story that they're telling themselves, and they want to make you part of their story. And if you're starting to change, like if it's a relative, maybe they see you in a specific way, and you changing affects them. It almost like endangers them in some way, and they don't want you to change. You have to understand. So understanding that that's happening detaches you from the anger towards them, because that's how all these fights happen, right? It's like, you're not responsible for them. You can have empathy, but having the boundaries to say, I'm doing what I have to do that's right for me and the people around me. And it's not always going to work out in the best way, but at least you don't have to be sucked into the negativity.
I definitely want to be mindful of your time. I have one more question for you. If there was one thing, one single thing, not multiple, or one explanation that involves multiple steps, and I know that that's not the case, but I want to know what's most important from your position. I know that everything is a puzzle and it comes together, but if it was one thing that you would advise someone that's looking right now to step out of the solo entrepreneurship into leadership position, what would it be, one life-changing thing that they should look into it?
The biggest message of our event in September is that there is a version of you in the future that has achieved all your dreams. and you can communicate with them. It's actually what I've been doing for the past 10 years. How I've, I don't talk about money, but like I've made a lot of money and I've lived and I am living a dream life, and I've won Emmy Awards and all kinds of awards. But more importantly, the work I do has meaning for me and I find joy from it. And I'm surrounded by the most incredible people and I love what I do. And this is what I want for everybody. And it's because I was able to communicate with my future self in a very unique way to figure out what is my path, because people have no clarity around what can my future look like. We're teaching this at my event, how to do this. The one thing to understand and believe is that it's possible, that there is a version of you, like there's a million versions of your future based on the choices you make. I want to show you how to make the choices that are aligned with you so that you get to where I am. It's like your life feels incredible, even when when there's stress and crisis. It doesn't matter. We all have these things. It's not as scary as people think. It's actually fuel to get to your next level. And I want to show people how to do that. And I literally want to change people's lives. So my invitation is to come to this event. Archangelsummit.com is the website. ARCHANGEL. I'm sure you'll leave the link.
Yeah, if you are providing me with all your links, they're going to be in the description. Everybody can go and sign up for that. Highly recommended. And I'm super excited to be part of this event. And I'm super grateful for you to come today and give me time out of your time. Thank you for teaching me how to ask you to participate to this interview.
You're welcome.
I'm continuing using it, and hopefully I will be your case study among many that they're doing the same. But it's my journey, so I'm grateful to share it to you and let you know how things progress.
Thank you. And I'll say, anyone who watched this, DM me on Instagram. I will respond to you. Like it's me, not my team or a robot or something.
Yes, 100%. And I can attest that you answer to
I do.
me.